Chapter 5. Tuesday morning, and not just any Tuesday, but the first Tuesday of the month, which meant Theo and about 50 other Boy Scouts from Troop 1440, Old Bluff Council, wore their official scouting shirts and colorful neckerchiefs to school. The school board had decided that the wearing of a full uniform by a Boy Scout on school property would not be tolerated. There was a dress code that was vague, loosely enforced, and always causing trouble, and a full Scout uniform would not violate it. However, the school board was worried that if it allowed Boy Scouts and Girl Scout uniforms on campus, even for just one specific day each month, then all types of uniforms might follow. Sports uniforms, karate uniforms, theatrical uniforms, even religious garments like Buddhist robes and Muslim burqas. The entire issue had become complicated, and when a compromise was reached, Theo and other scouts felt lucky to get a partial uniform one day a month. He showered quickly, brushed his teeth, which were covered in thick braces and virtually unseen, and put on his official khaki short-sleeved shirt adorned with the choir council shoulder patch, blue and white troop numerals, patrol emblem, and life ranking award. When the shirt was perfect and tucked into a pair of jeans, he carefully fitted the orange neckerchief around his neck and secured it with the official scout slide. A full uniform would have allowed Theo to show off his merit badge sash, something he was proud of because he had just been awarded his 22nd and 23rd merit badges in astronomy and golf. If all went according to plan, Theo would attain the rank of Eagle the summer before he entered the 9th grade. His goal, other than becoming an Eagle Scout, was to have at least 35 merit badges, all colorfully displayed and sewed on perfect order by his mother. Judge, who slept under Theo's bed, had been awake for 30 minutes and was tired of waiting. He was whimpering and wanted to go downstairs, then outside. Theo adjusted his neckerchief again, approved of what he saw in the mirror, grabbed his backpack, and bounced down the stairs. For the moment, he had forgotten about the Pete Duffy disappearance. His mother, who was not an early morning go-getter, was sipping coffee at the kitchen table and reading the newspaper. "Good morning, Theo. Aren't you cute?" "Good morning," Theo said as he kissed his mother on the forehead. He hated the word cute when it was used to describe him. He opened the door and Judge disappeared outside. Before his chair was the usual, a box of cereal, a carton of milk, a bowl, a spoon, and a glass of orange juice. "No sign of Pete Duffy," his mother said, her nose still stuck in the paper. "They're not going to find him," Theo said, repeating what he had said numerous times over dinner. "I'm not so sure about that. It's hard to run away from the FBI these days, with all the technology they have." Theo had heard this too, over dinner. He had fixed his bowl of cereal and then opened the door again so Judge would race in. Judge did not waste time in the mornings when breakfast was being served. Theo poured cereal and milk into the dog's bowl, and Judge attacked it. Without taking her eyes off the newspaper, Miss Boone said, you have scouting this afternoon, huh?" "No, Mom, it's Halloween." "No, Mom, it's all my other shirts are dirty." "No, Mom, this is an attempt to confuse you so you'll only think it's the first Tuesday of the month. Then maybe you'll show up in the wrong courtroom. Oh, of all the things he wanted to say, but Theo, being a good scout and respecting authority, and also being a good son, and not wanting to anger his mother with a smart remark, said, "Sure." When's the next camping trips?" he asked, slowly turning a page. "A week from Friday at Lake Marlowe. Troop 1440 spent at least one weekend per month in the woods, and the camping trips were Theo's favorite adventures. There was at least one clock in every room of the Boone home, a clear sign of organized people. The one in the kitchen gave the time at 7:55, and Theo finished breakfast every day at 8 a.m. When Judge slurped the last bit of breakfast, Theo rinsed both bowls in sink, returned the milk and orange juice to the refrigerator, and raced up the stairs where he stomped around his room for a few times to make some noise. Without brushing his teeth for a second time, he sprinted back to the kitchen where he pecked his mother on the cheek and said, "I'm off to school." "Lunch money?" she asked. "Always. Is your homework done?" "It's perfect, Mom. I'll see you after school." "Be careful, Teddy, and remember to smile." "I'm smiling, Mom." "Love you, Teddy." Over his shoulder, he said, "Love you, Mom." Outside, he rubbed Judge's head and said goodbye. Racing away, he repeated a word Teddy by a bothersome little family nickname that he had despised. "Cute little Teddy," he mumbled to himself. He waved at Mr. Nunnery, a neighbor who would spend his entire day sitting on his porch. As Theo sped through Strattonburg, he remembered yesterday's incident in Buck Baloney's backyard and decided to stay on the streets and obey the rules of the road. He also thought about the Duffy trial and all the excitement he would miss because the defendant had chosen to become a fugitive. Theo thought about a lot of things as he dashed along the sleepy streets of Strattonburg. His locker, he was anxious to see if it had been violated. His slashed tire, could it possibly happen again? Omar, Cheap, and Paco, might they still be watching him? Homer was buzzing with the latest Duffy gossip. All 16 boys were brimming with opinions and scenarios they had picked up over the dinner table and heard their parents debating. One report had a possible sighting not far away by a rural mail carrier. Another had Pete Duffy murdered by drug lords. Yet another had him safe and untouchable in Argentina. Theo listened to the chatter but did not participate. He was just happy he had found his locker secure. The bell rang and the boys filed out of the room and drifted to the hallway. Another dreary day of classes underway. Troop 1440 met in the basement of a building owned by the VFW, Veterans of Foreign Wars. Upstairs, the older soldiers gathered each afternoon for pinochle, cribbage, and beer, and on the first and third Tuesdays, the Boy Scouts met below for their official meetings. The Scoutmaster was a former Marine who preferred to be called Major Ludwig, or simply Major for short, and occasionally Wiggy behind his back, but only when it was absolutely certain that he was far away. Major Ludwig was about 60 years old and ran Troop 1440 as if he were preparing a bunch of Marines for an invasion. He was a serious runner, claimed to do 500 sit-ups and push-ups before breakfast, and was constantly pushing his boys to swim further, row faster, hike longer, and in general do everything better. He monitored their report cards and expected every member of the troop to attain the rank of Eagle. He tolerated no bad habits, was quick to call parents if a scout was falling behind. And though he could bark like a drill sergeant, the major knew precisely how to mix discipline and fun. He liked to yell, but he also liked to laugh. The boys adored him. Occasionally, when he wasn't dreaming of becoming a great trial lawyer or a wise judge, Theo thought about becoming a full-time scoutmaster just like the major. Such a future posed problems, though, because scouting was volunteer work. At precisely 4 p.m., the major called for order, and the large room fell silent. Troop 1440 was divided into 5 patrols: Panther, Rattlesnake, Ranger, Warthog, and Falcon. Each had a patrol leader, assistant leader, and 7 or 8 other members. Theo headed the Falcon patrol at rapt attention and under intense gaze of the major. The troop pledged allegiance to the flag, and then the scout pledged and the motto. After the scouts were seated, the major led them through a well-organized agenda that included reports from each patrol, rankings, and merit badge updates, fundraising activities, and most importantly, plans for the next weekend camp out at Lake Marlowe. There was a 15-minute video on the first aid for puncture wounds, and that was followed by a work session with ropes and knots. The major explained that he was less than impressed with the troops' overall level of hitching, lashing, and knotting, and he expected better work during the camping trip. Because he had been practicing for years, the major was a whiz with the square knot and clove hitch. But what dazzled the boys was his mastery of the more complicated knots, such as the timber hitch and overhand bend. As always, the 90-minute meeting flew by, and at precisely 5:30 it was adjourned. Most of the scouts left on bikes, and as Theo shoved off with the gang, he realized there was a problem. The rear tire was flat. Gil's wheels was closing as Theo approached, tired and sweating from the ordeal, pushing his bike at least 10 blocks from the VFW. Well, well, Gil said as he rubbed his hands on a sharp rag he kept in his pocket. My favorite customer. Theo felt like crying. Not only was he tired, but he was overwhelmed with the thought of buying another tire, and more importantly, frightened that someone was really after him. Gil spun the rear tire, stopped it, and poked the incision, and said, "Yep, probably the same knife that got the front tire yesterday. This happened at school?" "No, at the VFW while I was in the scout meeting." "So this person is following you around, huh?" "I don't know, Gil. What should I do?" "Have you told your parents?" "No one knows but you." Gil had a wrench and was slowly removing the rear tire from the bike's frame. "Me, I'd start with my parents. Then I'd think about filing a report with the police, and someone at the school should know about it too. I'll bet you're not the only kid who's getting his tires cut like this. Have you seen others in here?" "Not in a couple weeks, but this is the only bike shop in town. Of course, it's the best, if you want my unbiased opinion." Ha ha. Gil laughed at his own humor, but Theo could not crack a smile. $18? He asked. "Same as yesterday," Gil replied. "I guess I better talk to my dad." "Good idea." Woods Boone was in his office meeting with another lawyer. Marcella Boone was in her office with a divorce client. Elsa was on the phone when Theo arrived, and Dorothy and Vince were running errands. Only Judge was waiting for Theo, and the two made their way to his tiny office in the back of the building. Theo unloaded his backpack and his desk. An old card table was soon covered with books, notepads, and his laptop. He was daydreaming, though, and unable to concentrate on homework. Why would anyone slash his tires and vandalize his locker? He had no enemies, and at this point in his life, unless he was considered Omar, Cheap, and Paco, and he was convinced that they had more important things to worry about. They were career things, real pros. They were career thugs, real pros, not exactly the types to do their dirty work around a middle school. How could they possibly sneak through the hallways of a school without being noticed? There was no way. And why would they be interested in stealing a 3-pack of inhalers and a twins cap? He could not imagine them loitering around the bike racks by the front flagpole, watching for the right moment to cut his tire, or to following him to the VFW for a Boy Scout meeting. Theo suspected Vanna was another student, but who and why? Theo was lost in these thoughts when, literally, his world was shattered. There was a door that led from his office to the rear parking lot of Boone and Boone, and on the top of the door was compromised with four panes of glass. A large rock suddenly burst through the glass, crashing loudly and sending shards of broken glass everywhere, onto the bookshelves, over his desk, across the floor. Judge jumped and barked loudly. Theo instinctively threw both arms over his head just in case there was another rock on the way. He waited for a few seconds, trying to catch his breath, then bolted to his feet. He opened the door, but saw no one outside. Judge, growling and barking, jumped down the steps and raced around the small parking lot, but found nothing. The rock was the size of a softball and came to rest next to Judge's bed. Elsa rushed in and exclaimed, "Theo, what in the world?" Then she saw the shattered window panes and broken glass. "Are you okay?" "I think so," Theo said, still in shock. "What happened?" "Someone threw a rock," Theo said as he picked it up. They examined it. Miss Boone appeared and asked, "What's going on back here?" Then Mr. Boone walked in behind her and asked the same thing. For a few minutes, they inspected the damage and scratched their heads. Elsa found a piece of glass in Theo's hair, but there were no wounds. "I'll call the police," Mr. Boone said. "Good idea," said Miss Boone. "Any idea who did this?" Elsa asked. No, Theo replied. And that's the end of chapter 5.